All right, well, that's the actors. Ugh. Fuck.
Nailed it in one.
This week, we'll be looking at Season 9, Episode 4, Werewolf.
But first, some follow-up. Lots of it.
April from Pennsylvania listened to Episode 11 about Iga and writes, "Hello, and thanks again for going way too in-depth on another MST movie. When I watched Iga at the live show, I'm so jealous of you, it was the first time that I noticed that Ray Dennis Steckler of Episode 812, The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living, was in it. I hope you would tell us about what the heck he was doing there." I don't know, do you know?
I have no idea. I know that, and I think it was in the interview that I linked to with Archibald Jr., that he mentioned working with Ray Dennis Steckler, but they didn't really go into specifics. I guess he and the Halls just ran into similar circles. They certainly produced movies of a similar quality, as Ray Dennis Steckler made a semi-serious, semi-parody movie that is equal parts 1960s Adam West Batman and crime drama that was supposed to be called Rat Fink and Boo Boo, but when they made the titles, the N and the D went missing, so it's just Rat Fink a Boo Boo. This movie saw theatrical release. Thank you.
April continues. Also, I stumbled across the Archie vs. Predator hardcover book a few months ago. It was made in hardcover? And I got it for a friend as a silly present. I haven't heard from my friend in a while. Could I have made a horrible mistake that ruined our friendship?
Or perhaps your friend is the one who bested the Predator and is now king of the Predators.
I would think that would be a pretty good gift myself. I wouldn't cut off a friendship for it.
No, if anything, that would bring you closer together. Admittedly, it would not have the same effect as getting the truest and greatest Archie book, Archie Meets the Punisher.
You want to do the next one, Adam?
Oh, sure. I had a dream, a terrible dream forewarning me of more sand content. A giant made out of sand appeared in a red room and said, "It is happening again." As Michael from Toronto writes, "You guys neglected to mention the totally goth black sand beaches of Iceland during the sandbox from last episode. If you pick up this seashell and put it to your ear, you can faintly hear Bela Lugosi's dead. That's how goth it is." Anyway, he wrote in to say that he loves the new segment, More Sandbox.
Maybe we'll dedicate some pieces to other raw materials in the future. Like if we were doing Manos in the future, we could do it about desert fauna.
I am riveted. Beth, I think as you were explaining that, I literally just died. I imagine that when it comes time for that to happen on It's Just a Show, it's going to be you talking to a skeleton with headphones in.
So, Adam's skeleton. It seems like a lot of succulents have come into millennial trending right now. You see a lot of that in our future movie, Beast of Yucca Flats. Have you ever thought about getting a yucca plant for your home?
Skeleton noise. My biggest fear is a skeleton, though. I bet you any money that some men's rights activist is going to steal my skull and put it in his bookshelf. The curse of Davis O'Reilly is that he must collect 12 golden skulls to attain pure MRA power.
To protect his fluids.
Oh no, our precious bodily fluids. Also, before we go ahead, there's two pieces of follow-up, two pieces of internet follow-up, the best kind of follow-up.
Oh.
One, there was all that talk of Machiste on our Facebook page, which I think we'll actually dive into a lot of the really interesting stuff that people brought up about Machiste when we get to Colossus versus the Headhunters. But there's some really neat stuff there. So if you have not gone by on the It's Just a Show page on Facebook and given it a like, please do if you want to learn more about other beefcakes of note. And secondly, I have a plug. A friend of mine, a guy that I had met because we are both pod people. We both make podcasts. And he had asked me to record something for a project he's doing. His name's Calvin Redburn, and he has a podcast called The Spoony Bard's Oral Theater, in which he and a bunch of others are doing a radio play dramatization of the game Fallout.
Whoa!
He presented me with a list of parts And when I saw that one of them was Mutant on Radio, I insisted that that's the only one I do. He told me it had 2 lines, and I was like, more's the better. And so if you like mutants, if you like radios, I would give that a listen. He has given us some plugs on his podcast as well. So that was awful nice of him, too.
Oh, that sounds really great. Like, the Fallout universe is quite rich, so you could do a lot with it. Very smart. I think I will check it out.
It's super fun, and in a couple of cases, like he and his partner who are doing the pod haven't recast, like they've kept some of the game audio. So I was listening to the one that I did, and the first 10 or so minutes, I was like, "Is that Tony J? Oh my God, it's Megabyte from Reboot!" Which made it all the more mystical because Tony J has been dead for about 5 or so years. Today we looked at Season 9, Episode 4, Werewolf. A fight breaks out at an archaeological dig between Yuri, a hot-tempered archaeologist whose brick of hair changes color when he's angry, and Tommy, one of the diggers. Tommy falls and cuts himself on a skeleton in the skirmish. But it wasn't just a skeleton, it was a rock no. It's the skeleton of a werewolf. Nope, sorry. It's actually the skeleton of a Native American creature known as the Yetaglanchi. What's a Yetaglanchi, you ask? Ha! According to this movie, it's not a werewolf, that's for sure. It's super different. Yetaglanchi is many things to many people, but usually it's a man wrapped in a brown duvet wearing a wolf mask. At the hospital, Tommy shows all the symptoms of a man infected by a magic skeleton, much to Yuri's delight. The moon may be full, but before Tommy can go on a rampage, he's shot dead by a lesser Estevez, or Lestevez. The action moves to Flagstaff, but Yuri's too focused on his beautiful, ambiguously European colleague who pronounces werewolf differently in every scene. Let's call her Tammy Wiseau. Yuri strikes out when Tammy hooks up with Paul, a writer. Sexually frustrated and hair morphing with rage, Yuri goes about proving the existence of werewolves by poisoning others with the magic skeleton. First, a security guard, then Paul. Before anyone in the film realizes what's going on, Tammy Wiseau goes to the red-green survivalist shack her new writer beau / Yetaglanchi is staying in. Oh, hi, Paul. Instead of ending in tragedy, the Lycan Paul kills Yuri and spreads his Skinwalker magic to Tammy, where they pose for a werewolf Sears family portrait. The end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, the bots inform us that Mike hit his head after tripping on Tom's yam collection, and he now believes he's inside the actor's studio host James Lipton. After the break, a back-to-normal Mike tries to escape to Earth via a modular descent unit, but accidentally repels into Castle Forrester. Pearl suddenly suggests that he should head back to the SOL. In segment 2, the guys ask each other, who would you want in your werewolf movie? Their suggestions include Joe Estevez, Emilio Klugman, Spike Knotts, and Chit Hitler. Crow doesn't really want to take part. He suggests Ray Liotta, which Tom rejects because he smells like apples. In segment 3, inspired by the movie in which a hapless security guard transforms into a werewolf while driving, the guys get glammed up in 50s drag and Mike/Susie sings a doo-wop homage to his boyfriend Steve, a werewolf who died tragically in a car crash.
Oh werewolf, I've lived every werewolf.
It's pretty good. In segment 4, Mike begins to turn into a werecrow after accidentally falling on the original crow and absorbing his essence. And in the final segment, the fully transformed werecrow accepts his fate. Meanwhile, inspired by the movie, Pearl attempts to transfer the essence of a wolf into a peasant, but the wolf Bobo brings is actually just an adorable puppy dog. We haven't done a sci-fi episode since Future War way back in episode 4, which led to a special mini-sode mega rant about our issues with the sci-fi era. And we got a little bit of pushback on that. A lot of fans are real defenders of that era and think that the best that MST3K has ever done came out of the sci-fi years. So, for example, Jessica from Maryland tweets that she loves lots of sci-fi eps, but that she found Future War a bit dragging.
And we also got a nice long email from Jason, who lives on the internet, who also prefers the Comedy Central era. And I think that's also worth mentioning. Like, even though we got some folks who are saying, you know, we need to see different episodes and give it another chance post Future War, which I'm open to, a lot of people did email us saying thanks for sharing a view that I've never voiced, which is that the show kind of lost something in that time. But anyway, Jason writes, I like the stranger, less mainstream movies. The sci-fi era had a few too many Universal movies that were mostly just a little campy, but not bad enough and not enough weird, sleazy stuff that hadn't seen the light of day in 30 to 40 years.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anyway, did this movie change your mind about the sci-fi era?
Well, Beth, how I feel about this movie is bound to startle and surprise you with its never voiced view, because we've never talked about this. But I hated this episode. This was terrible.
Really?
Yes. What about you?
I loved it.
Oh my God, what?
Yeah, this converted me.
Are you doing a bit?
The riffs were fantastic, I thought. It's really sharp. The host segments, I still think are very weak, and we can go into that, but I think this is the sci-fi years at its best, and people are right to really like this movie. Like, the movie itself is unbelievably bad, but in such a wonderful way. And the riffs are really, really good. Now, I think one of the reasons I didn't like it at first was that I hadn't watched this during the first run. So I was watching it like maybe 5 years ago or so. So I'd already internalized that millennial tendency to not pay full enough attention to be on my phone while I'm doing it. You can't do that for this movie. Number one, because just in general, Mystery Science Theater 3000, you need to give your full attention to, but also because the sound mixing on the episode is not great. For whatever reason, the movie is very loud and the riffing is very quiet. So it's actually quite hard to hear the riffing going on. So I would recommend people out there who want to visit or revisit this movie, watch it with the captions on, because otherwise you're going to miss a lot. But you were not impressed by the riffing either, I take it?
Yeah, I was not impressed by this episode. I just couldn't get into it. Part of it was that I found, at the least with Future War, I was totally entertained by the movie, because it's so colorful and strange, and it has a kind of sense of, people putting on a show well beyond their means, and I kind of like that. Werewolf should have the same thing, because I think it was shot for like $300,000 or $350,000. Like, it's an extremely minuscule budget film, but I just found that the movie itself drags, and a lot of the riffs just didn't hit home for me. Like, I remember at one point, it's during the security guard bit, which features a cameo from the film's director. There is a part where the security guard wakes up, and I think the riff it's like, oh, my underpants are suddenly on backwards. And I was like, oh, good. There's a joke about sexual assault in my puppet show. Thanks a lot. I don't know. I just didn't really connect with it. Although I do give credit, and we'll talk about this later, I do give credit to a clever thing that was done during the end credits, where they're all chiming in with different song lyrics, all kind of united by Tusk.
Yeah, and like songs that all have the same kind of pacing and tempo as the song in the credits. And it's very clever.
That was a unique thing. I don't recall anything that similar. Like, I know there's always been singing along with like musical bits of the score or songs on the soundtrack, but like, it's never been a whole suite of music as it was in this episode. So I do give bonus points for that. But for the most part, I the things that I enjoyed in this episode were just honest reactions to weirdness in the movie. Like, there's a scene in the film where the security guard, played by our director, sees a werewolf skeleton, and he's supposed to just kind of snicker, but instead of laughing, he just produces this weird honking sound.
Just honk?
I don't know, the reaction to that tickled me, and like, again, just honest, just what the hell kind of reactions from the cast, and some very bizarre line readings really got me through the ep. But it was pretty telling that I remember when I first tried to watch this, my Netflix, my PlayStation, and then my television all kind of shut down from disinterest, because I paused the episode and just kind of puttered around my apartment to do other things, and I never got back to it until the next day.
I see.
Like, everything in my apartment shut down.
Wow. I don't know. I think like I was really impressed by how bad this movie was, like joyously bad. One of the things that I really liked about it is the actor choices, like the casting choices are really perfect. Like you only have two different kinds of actors in this movie. You have people who are really overdoing it, like Joe Estevez, for instance, who just screams and yells every single line he has. He's always seems that he's on the precipice of a nervous breakdown, and there's no reason other than he just really needs to chew up the scenery. Like, he's not a major character at all. And then there's Jorge Rivera, who plays Yuri, and he also is just completely hamming it up. And then pretty much everyone else feels catatonic, especially my very favorite actor in this, Adriana Miles, who seems like, well, not only is she a terrible actor, but she seems stoned in this entire movie. Like, she says everything very slowly and like she's just woken out of a haze.
This is absolutely fascinating.
And I think Mike and the Bot play on that very effectively.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily how stoned out she would be, but she does have a David after dentist quality.
Yeah, exactly. Is this real life?
Is this real life? She does have a certain way of saying her lines. Like, you know how Bela Lugosi was taught English, like, phonetically, so that he does not always know what he's saying in the original Dracula, but you could never tell. He just kind of acts his way through a language he doesn't know. And in this, you have what that would look like under most circumstances, because if you didn't know any better, you'd swear that Adriana Miles was taught English by a dog whose mouth was full of peanut butter.
And, you know, it's maybe a little bit of a low blow to make fun of somebody's accent, but I mean, casting decisions were made, scripting decisions were not gone over very carefully, and this is the result we get. Which is like I think my favorite line is when she's saying, well, maybe then it's too late. And Mike's like, oh, the future conditional pluperfect subjunctive. Like, yes. That was some messed up verb tense there.
I do think that the key to her being cast, I think, was that she was in the area and she was totally fine with wearing super tight shirts.
Well, I had seen somewhere else that this director has a penchant for Eastern European women.
I guess that's his thing, is that he's looking for Adriana Miles types in much the same way that Russ Meyer was looking for giant ladies, Amazons. But he is a pretty interesting figure if you want to get into that.
Before we do, I just want to mention one more favorite moment in the movie, which just stood on its own as being awesome without any riffing on it. So Adriana is a pool shark, and she manages to impress a local biker, you know, a long-haired, leather-jacketed biker who decides he's going to play pool with her, and kind of struts over. He's smoking a cigar, and he goes to rack the balls in the triangle, and it's like suddenly Jerry Lewis has taken over the part. The balls go everywhere. He's madly trying to like collect them all. His pool cue that he put to the side falls down, goes tonk tonk, and like, but he still has like this totally like, I'm on top of this face the entire time he's doing it, even though he couldn't have fucked it up more. And like, this is this director's reputation. Like, he almost never did a second take, so he's just like, all right, go with it.
Yeah, it takes God's money, and this movie was filmed for under $500,000.
So you know something about this director.
Well, I have a bit of a soft spot for him, but I only when I found out like what his background was. Like, I did a little bit of digging because I think, like a lot of people who saw Werewolf, I assumed that he didn't make another movie.
We should mention his name is Tony Zarandast.
Yeah. And the thing about Zarandast is that doing a little digging on him is that he was sometimes referred to as the Persian Ed Wood.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's made a bunch of movies, and there is a fantastic article, and I mean a fantastic article, from the LA Times, and there'll be a link in the show notes, where he talks about, among other things, this movie, his career, what it's like to be an independent producer of film, and that's one of the things that makes me like him, is that I really like these kind of fly-by-night entertainers. Mm-hmm. I like people who are just kind of funny movies out of their own pocket. He's almost like a really, really successful version of the fellow from American Movie who made Coven.
Oh boy.
Yeah, because he is making films that, judging by Werewolf, are of nothing else, like, of a much lesser quality than Coven.
Yeah, well, Coven was a passion project. Like, he was actually trying to make something good, and he wasn't worried about staying under funding or whatever, right?
Yeah, whereas as this, like, it was horrendous, is essentially just trying to spend as little money as possible in order to maximize profits with a poster and a video box, which, again, we'll get into much later in this podcast. But I was really familiar with this movie because I had rented it before. And based on that and that alone, I was like, you know what? I'm not interested in looking up this guy. But I regret that now. There are so many choice quotes from this article, which is called The Last Low-Budget Action Hero.
Oh, perfect.
Yep. It was put out, it was written in 99, so it doesn't cover his entire career because even as late as 2012, Zarandast was making movies. And in 2012, he made a movie called Golden Cage starring, you guessed it, Joe Estevez.
Oh, they became pals.
Well, you know what? If you've got Estevez money, you've got a pal for life. So he's an Iranian-born film producer, and he had made such films as Hard Case and Fist.
Wait, Hard Cage and Fist?
Hard Case and Fist.
Oh, okay.
One's a hard case, and the other, I don't know, is a fist. They're cops.
That is some strange parallelism there.
In many ways, like, he's like an even lower budgeted, even more fly-by-night version of the Go-Go Boys. Like, are you familiar with Canon Films or the documentary they made about Canon Films not that long ago?
No, I've never heard of that.
Okay. Well, long story short is Canon and the Go-Go Boys, Menahem Golan and Yoram Globus, were two Israeli film producers.
Oh wait, Golem and Globus. Yes. Didn't they make?
Yeah.
Did they not make Power Rangers?
No, you're thinking of Saban.
Okay.
You're thinking of Shuki Levy and, what's his name? Haim Saban. Yeah.
That might have been racist of me.
Listeners, write in. Is Beth a racist? We're taking a poll. But the Go-Go Boys, as they were not too affectionately referred to in Hollywood, broke into the American market usually by copying whatever they thought was a trend. So they see that the movie Death Wish in 1974 did very well. So in the late 70s and throughout the 80s, they funded a bunch of Death Wish sequels.
Okay.
Solely for the purpose. Now, for the plot of Death Wish, it's basically Charles Bronson's family gets attacked, then Charles Bronson goes on a murderous rampage. So every movie is about Charles Bronson visiting a relative, they get attacked by criminals, and Charles Bronson goes on a murderous rampage.
Oh, see, I thought it was about Charles Bronson lying in a hospital bed saying, "I wish I was dead." Oy.
Thank you, the critic. But they made they made 3 of those. There were 4 sequels in total, but the last one was made by the American version of the Go-Go Boys, the Weinstein brothers of Miramax fame.
Right.
And essentially, Zarandast was doing essentially what the Go-Go Boys were doing. It's like whatever kind of trend that he could follow, he would make a movie based on it. One of my favorite quotes from the LA Times article is this. My latest film is called Blood of His Own. I am starring in it. It is a very touchy subject. This is a movie like The Crying Game. It's about a guy who falls in love with a waitress who turns out to be a guy. He is very anti-gay. He decides to kill his own brother, and that's the only reference to the movie that is made. Like, these these pitches are like Amazon reviews. There is another one that I think is also a pretty choice quote, where he talks about his movie Red Room. It was like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I still haven't been able to sell it in the US because of the violence content. And that's right, violence content. There is a necrophilia scene, which is very erotic and at the same time, very scary.
I do have a quote here from Zarandast. I don't know how you say his name, so I apologize for that. About the movie Werewolf. So he plays a security guard and is injected with the blood of a werewolf, and this is how he describes it. I become a werewolf. I smash my car into oil wells and blow myself up. That film was sold all over the world.
Yep. And that is why I make the comparison with the Go-Go Boys, because they had a similar kind of ebullient and joyful tendency to self-promote. Mm-hmm. And he reminds me of that, but essentially on a lower budget. I didn't think it was possible to be Cannon, who of course like funded every Chuck Norris and Charles Bronson movie of the 80s and every movie with ninja in the title in the 1980s. But he found a way, and again, made a ton of movies. So I kind of I have a soft spot for him. I respect him. And if nothing else, one of the things that I did enjoy about the movie, at least, is the scene where the director playing the security guard, he turns into a werewolf and tries to drive home, I guess, but slowly undergoes his werewolf transformation. Mm-hmm. And after a while, it just starts looking like Disney's The Shaggy DA.
Yeah. But it answered the question, like, can werewolves drive? The answer is no.
Yes, you will believe a dog can drive a car. Oh, and I it doesn't mention this in the article, but it is kind of funny. Or at least I don't think it does. You'll notice that the explosion is the most expensive thing in the movie.
Right, by a long shot.
And it's stock footage. That's why.
Oh, I didn't even catch that. Good job. Good job, Tony.
What happened is that he had access to that footage, and what he did is that he painted his own car, or an older car that he had, black to match the color for the scene.
Ah.
But eagle-eyed viewers have noticed that the car actually changes make between the driving scenes and the explosion itself.
Okay, I'm starting to like this guy.
Yeah, classic Zarindast. Zarindast is obviously an expert on werewolves, and as such, do you think that he knows anything about the Navajo Skinwalkers? Because I'm not sure that he does.
I would say no. I get the sense that he ripped off a lot of Jurassic Park to set up this movie. Basically, like, let's get a bunch of archaeologists on a dig, and they find something. And what's nearby LA? Well, the Badlands. Let's just go there. And that's near traditional Navajo territory. So let's just import some Navajo myth, which is the Skinwalker myth. Now, do you know anything about this?
Only a little bit, because they did an X-Files episode that is remarkably similar to this in season 1, where Michael Horse from Twin Peaks is basically investigating werewolf deaths. Yeah,
so it's a Navajo myth about the Skinwalkers, and we should just say, like, the Navajo are reluctant to share their lore with people outside the tribe, and I think for good reason, because look what the West has done with it.
Yeah, honkies be tripping.
So, Skinwalker is a witch, so basically like the evil version of a traditional medicine man, and practices evil magic, and they're able to take on the forms of animals, and the rituals they practice are basically an inversion of like traditional medicine man practices. So, mocking divine rights in that way, and they can steal your soul kind of by looking into your eyes. And it has a kind of vampire-like quality to it, because you're safe from skinwalkers if you are in the domestic hearth. They can't go into houses. But they're also like vampires in that they kind of walk amongst normal human beings, and you might not catch who they are. It's kind of a secret society. So it's basically the sense of like a threat to the tribe from the inside, right?
Okay.
So the skinwalkers, they can take on many forms, and only one of them is really like a kind of, a four-legged creature, but that's the one that seemed most like werewolves, I guess, and that's what's been imported here. They're not werewolves. It's a completely different thing. They're completely in control of what they're doing, so it's not like a werewolf where you just go feral and you don't know what you're doing, which is very much what happens here. This is just a werewolf. I don't know why they felt the need to pull in the skinwalker stuff, other than it gave it an exotic flavor, perhaps.
Although it's weird is that like they don't even, and again we'll get into this later, there was never even an attempt to catch in on this, because you could have just called the movie Skinwalker. Mm-hmm. Or Skinwalkers, and that could have built up intrigue, because like werewolf movies are a dime a dozen, and if you are loudly advertising that your movie has a werewolf in it, people who like horror movies and wolfmen are going to be real excited about seeing a cool werewolf, which we do not receive at any point in this movie. I sometimes wonder if maybe the Skinwalker story element was grafted on for budgetary reasons. And I mention that because the MST crew seem confused by this, like both in the episode and then later Bill Corbett wrote about Werewolf on the Sci-Fi Channel's equivalent to the Amazing Colossal Episode Guide. Like they would sort of do a bit of a blog in the style of the guide after every episode on the website. And he mentions how, the werewolf is different from scene to scene. Like sometimes it's supposed to look like a werewolf and they even have like an animatronic head for it. Sometimes it is more of a Lon Chaney Wolfman. And sometimes it's just a fuzzy looking guy. Like and even sometimes resembles more of a Neanderthal. And I think that was them getting away with the fact that they either didn't have that animatronic mask for very long or it didn't work, which is often the case with animatronic effects. Like servos and rotors, like these things tend to blow up and malfunction very, very quickly. And it's a real crapshoot, which is one of the reasons why like animatronic effects, particularly on like lower budgeted movies, just aren't done anymore. So I think this was like maybe a way of Zarandas covering his ass and making a movie where the werewolf could look different in every scene depending on funds.
Maybe, but he also really relies on American Indian music for both the beginning credits and the end credits. So he's again, that's why I feel like he's kind of pulling on an exotic kind of flavor, which is like, I think there's some cultural appropriation going on here and that's like the main dig people have about cultural appropriation is you're just importing a flavor, a neat thing, and you're kind of ignoring, the people and everything else that goes with it. And I cannot understand, like they talk about silver bullets at one point, which is very like a European werewolf idea. But there's also like the way that you can use blood to turn people into like the weird kind of contagion quality. That seems more like a vampire thing, right? If you get bitten by a vampire, you turn into one. Although I guess lycanthropy is something that you can catch, right?
Yes, because I mean, like typically if you have the bite in movies and like, or if you survive a werewolf mauling, you can become a werewolf. Like, I mean, it kind of differs from movie to movie because, of course, there are some films, because vampires are also known to transform into, like, beasts of four legs and whatnot, depending, again, on myth and version of it, that sometimes they're almost interchangeable from werewolves.
Right.
And, like, some films and some pieces of fiction utilize that and some don't. I mean, it's one thing to discard something that's been established in, like, movie lore for decades and kind of pick and choose what you want to do. It does feel weird to just throw around the word skinwalker, just kind of, I assume, to cover the fact that they didn't have, like, they only had so much money to film certain kinds of transformations, or they only had so much time to put makeup on Paul in certain scenes. And, like, it also strikes me as, like, weird, even by the standards of genre movies about Native American mysticism, is that, like, usually that means that there's a plum role for, like, a native actor to go, like, only I know of this, and I'll tell you my horrible secret. This is what this creature is, and we're going to stop it, such as off-recommended and beloved movie by me, The Manitou. But there's no such case. The only native actor in the movie is killed off at the very beginning, Tommy, the crew worker who's at the archaeological dig.
Yeah, he's the first one to undergo the transformation, and he's shot by Joe Estevez.
Yeah, of all the indignities, to be shot by Joe Estevez in a day for night scene.
But I think just the incoherency we're detecting around this movie is no surprise, because everything about this movie is incoherent. And it's funny, in your movie summary, you said that Paul in werewolf form is the one who mauled Yuri. I assumed it was Natalie.
Oh.
In her werewolf form, yes.
Well, that's just it. A great movie like Werewolf leaves its viewers asking questions. Oh, man, this is the finale to Twin Peaks 2017 all over again. We may never know.
So, because, like, it leaves it open. And in that way, I actually thought, like, that's an interesting twist. Like, how long has she been a werewolf? It could have been a while.
Oh.
So,
sorry, it's super interesting that you point that out, because I just assume, you know how they cut to a commercial break when Paul, after he's been wolfified, and Natalie, when they hook up you get a commercial break, spinning MST3K globe, etc., and the movie picks up. And I've read a book called In the Peanut Gallery with MST3K, which has a bunch of interesting things on the show. But one of the things I found baffling in it is that when the writer addressed this episode, he mentioned that even though there's that whole long bit at the end of this movie where Mike and Servo and Crow are commenting, yes, we know she's a werewolf. That's the twist. We're waiting for it. We know, and the movie drags it out. And in the book, the author mentioned that it's like, but wait, they cut the sex scene out, which is what happens during that fade to black, which is the explanation. He's sexually transmitted werewolf. It's a werewolf STD, which admittedly is the first time I had seen that in a movie when I watched this in '96. I'd never seen werewolf lycanthropy pass through sexually before. But I would say that, by cutting that scene out, I mean, you still have the implications of the scene because it fades to black on what is clearly supposed to be a sex scene. Like, that part, at the very least, was not a moment of confusion.
Right. But then the idea that, yes, that she got a werewolf STD was the big reveal, I guess.
Although, sadly, I would have given anything if Adriana Miles had to deliver the line, "Oh, I see now, your penis is full of werewolves."
Hey, everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
I think it's time for Shallow 13. 13 quick facts about the movie. Adam, you better get yourself going.
Werewolf was originally filmed as The Arizona Werewolf, a title as short-lived and unfortunate as The Harlem Shake.
In fact, according to IMDb, this was the first film called simply Werewolf.
Werewolf's VHS release captivated prospective renters with its holographic cover and the immortal tagline, "Rest in Beast."
Yuri, the archaeologist whose hairstyle keeps changing, is played by Jorge Rivero, credited here as George Rivers. Apparently Rivero was never paid what he had been promised for this role, and never worked a non-union job again.
Rivero's a veteran actor with 122 IMDb credits, including roles in Howard Hawks' Rio Bravo and that episode of Columbo where Ricardo Montalban plays a cowardly matador. His latest credit is something called The Popcorn Chronicles, which was released in 2014.
Tom Servo says that, according to Whoopi Goldberg, Ray Liotta smells like apples. This may be a reference to their chemistry in 1994's Karina Karina, an interracial romance set in the 1950s.
Ray Liotta was asked whether he smelled like apples during an Ask Me Anything on popular internet site Reddit. He claimed to be unaware of his crisp, appley smell.
When Mike accidentally rappels into Castle Forrester, all three Mads are eating Crunch-themed cereal. Patrician Brain Guy enjoys some French Toast Crunch. Bobo has Banana Nut Crunch, and Head Honcho Pearl enjoys Cap'n Crunch.
In the final segment, Bobo brings out an adorable Cocker Spaniel that he mistakes for a werewolf. It's Kevin Murphy's beloved dog, Humphrey.
Fans of the Amazing Colossal Episode Guide will recognize Humphrey from the About the Authors section, in which every member of the show is photographed individually holding the good-natured pooch.
The Mr. and Mrs. B.O. Plenty riff references reformed Dick Tracy villains B.O. Plenty and Gravel Gertie, who married shortly after losing their lust for crime.
And got a lust for each other. The joke, "Paul, I enjoyed your letter to the Philippians," appears here. And I always hear it as Fallopians. When we heard it on Cry Wilderness, it was a letter to the Corinthians. Paul wrote a lot of letters.
As the MST3K wiki reports, this was the episode SciFi Channel submitted for Emmy consideration. It was not nominated. RIB 1998 Emmy nomination, Rest in Beast.
And that's time!
One of the things that came up multiple times because of the soundtrack choices in Werewolf was Pure Moods. What is Pure Moods? It was a compilation CD that featured both what was typed world music in the 90s and new agey instrumentals. Beth, how familiar are you with Moods, pure and otherwise?
I owned it.
Now, Beth, let's pull back the curtain here. When you revealed that you owned the CD in our show notes, what was my one-word response?
dork.
Rest in beast, your reputation.
So we should just, for people who don't know what we're talking about, the movie starts with some vaguely Native American chanting, and over at Tom Servo does the beginning of the song "Return to Innocence." I will redo it because I know it so well by heart. Hi-ya, hi-do-hi-ya.
Do you know where that chant comes from?
No.
Okay, so there's a recording that was done by, and again, in a episode where we are mangling a ton of names, this is going to be another one, by the Taiwanese Amis people, or what I'm seeing here on Wikipedia, it might be pronounced Amazu, but the Amazu people, they had a chant that was used in something called the Jubilant Drinking Song, which of course was recorded by white people and released and became a popular single. This was later used, that sample of them performing that was used as part of Return to Innocence. I found this out because I found an article on JSTOR, which will be in our show notes. But I found this out because they were later sued, for the use of that track, or the use of that sound clip, sorry. And in looking it over, according to this article, and this is something I find a little bit confusing, that Enigma is not referred to as a band, but is referred to as the record label.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know if that was a front or what. Yeah, because it says Enigma is a label of the Romanian-German producer Michael Cretu. And of course, it reached its big peak with both being on the Pure Mood CD and also being used for the Olympic Games.
Well, because Enigma was also, their other big hit was called Sadness or something, and it was very popular in the 90s, and it had a similar feel to it. They used a lot of Gregorian chanting in it. Mm-hmm. So they must have been a band at least at one point, or an artist, or a pseudonym for an artist. You should go see their video. It's crazy.
Yes, it is an enjoyable video, but Pure Moods, I remember very vaguely seeing commercials for this in the late 90s.
Only vaguely? Oh my God. Maybe it's because, again, my American satellite dish, but we were just inundated by this advertisement for Pure Moods. It was on constantly.
I think that's because the compilation CD for Pure Moods, they were a big sponsor of Empty Nest.
Deep cut. But so you could not escape it. And actually, I looked back at my old CD collection, and no, I actually did not own Pure Moods and that made sense because it was only available, I think, on TV. You could only get it on TV, so you had to call a number back then, and there's no way in hell my parents would ever let me do that. So I found a cheap, discount bid knockoff called Escapes that had a lot of similar music on it, and some of the same tracks. So that was my version. But yeah, I loved this kind of music back and I can't tell you why. I still do. I mean, I love Enya.
Oh, really?
I was really into that. Do you remember Solitudes?
No.
They sold it in a lot of drugstores. It's basically just a lot of like nature sounds with some classical music on top of it. I love that stuff.
Wait.
Canada D with some waves in the background.
If it's classical music over nature sounds, why didn't they call it Walks with Bach? I was delighted by the Pure Moods ad, which there's got to be a link in the show notes. This is so great. And I'm going to ask you, I'm curious if they do have these tracks, because half of them seem to be like world music, but the other half kind of touch a bit on prog rock and just film scoring, because like a chunk of Tubular Bells is there, and certainly the most famous chunk, which is often just referred to as Theme from The Exorcist. And they also had such gentle sounds as the theme from Twin Peaks, the theme about a woman who goes missing after she's murdered. And also the X-Files theme by DJ Dano.
Oh, but that's a trance version. That's a trance version of the X-Files theme.
That's the best part. It's not even the Mark Snow version. It's a super, Euro dance mix version. You half expect to hear the crazy frog chiming in on it.
Yeah, but they also have stuff like Brian Eno and Vangelis on it. So they've got... It was actually a really good album, I would say. And you're right, they didn't quite know what genre they were in, and later on they moved into more specific genres, but there's a little bit of trip hop later on that comes into it, which was a genre I loved back in the day. So they were willing to go creepy. Like, it wasn't just meant to be easy listening in the background, like so much other stuff that came out in compilation form back then. Like, admittedly, there is some Kenny G on this too, but
what a dork.
My version did not have Kenny G on it.
Then perhaps the CD should have been called Escape from Kenny G. That is totally a first-person RPG that I would play. Escape from Kenny G's house.
Well, so we've talked a lot about the movie. Maybe let's go back to the actual segments with Mike and the bots, because I said I really liked their riffing. Wasn't so impressed with the host segments.
Yeah, this continues the Sci-Fi Channel trend from what we've seen of just, I don't know, not really giving a damn for the sketches. Although there was at least one good one.
Yeah, the 50s doo-wop homage in segment 3 with lyrics by Mary Jo Pehl is really cute. It's a dead teenager song about a werewolf boyfriend named Steve.
Yeah, it's a rare, joyful, fun sketch in the Sci-Fi era, because it's usually, I find, at least watching these episodes and just about everything from this run, is that there's just a sense of weary resignation of having to write wraparound segments. And I again, that's one of the reasons why I think that with riff tracks, you just have a pure movie riffing thing with nothing else, because but at this point in the show, they're treating it as filler. But for this one little gem, this one nice little song, it's a reminder of what the show used to be, as little as, this is season 9, 2 seasons ago.
Yeah. I found segment 2 interesting. That's the one where they go through, like, who would you want in your werewolf movie? And the joke is initially all these less famous siblings of more famous actors. But then it starts to kind of devolve, and I did like Chit Hitler. I thought that was pretty funny. But
yeah, see, I genuinely thought that was funny.
But the sense of exhaustion in that segment I found really depressing. But then producer Chris pointed out that maybe this is a callback to the Joel era of sketches, where you'd have a lot of kind of variations on a theme in like storybook form, and that's why they just don't quite work with it. Like, they can't quite make it work because it's a different group of people, and they just can't make it funny anymore.
Well, the thing that's weird is that I kind of wonder what exactly is the main reason, because I don't disagree that the point of the sketch is kind of about how empty this is as a joke, which again I find weird because Chit Hitler is a funny name. But like, they're deliberately like doing the flashcards, which is something that they did for the very similar sketch in It Conquered the World.
Right.
And like, I wonder, like are they deliberately making fun of that sketch, which seems weird to me and seems less likely, just because like at this point, like that kind of rapid recall of the show's history is kind of gone. I don't know who was the major continuity expert in the olden days, but like in the Sci-Fi era, they're kind of forgetting stuff that they did a couple of years prior, like when Leonard Maltin shows up and there's no reference to the many references to Leonard Maltin in Laser Blast. Are they kind of criticizing that sketch or sketches like that in general? Are they just commenting on the fact that they no longer have the energy to do these kind of sketches? Or is it just that such a premise, no matter who did it, could never work? And I find it, like, I tried to find some more information by looking up the entry in the amazing Sci-Fi non-episode guide. It was a blog, deal with it. That's its official name. And all that Bill Corbett wrote for that entry was, it's names that sound like other names. That's who you'd want in your werewolf movie. Get it? In all caps. That's the part that I remember. And I was like, okay, it was weird, hostile response for what is a kind of sketch that, you know, this show did for a number of years. I don't understand. Like, I'm not sure what the intent was, other than we're doing a bit that we're not proud of, and we're also doing the frequent sci-fi era bit of one of the characters is not in on the bit and can't do it right, which was usually Crow. And this ties into something to go into with the sketches later on in the episode with the Were-Crow and the Were-Mike that Tom becomes. Because at this point in the show's history, I don't know who the characters are anymore personality-wise, which sounds weird when you're talking about homemade puppets. But it's true. Like, Crow and Tom used to be really, really specific. Like, to me, and I want to see if this jives with you, like, to me, Tom is very much the younger sibling. He is trying to sound cool, but he is, in fact, quite inexperienced and boring, and his feelings are very easily hurt. He collects underwear because he is a boring guy. He falls in love with turtles. He doesn't like it when Crow ribs on him. And Crow is very much the Bart Simpson of the group, who is always saying down with homework and whatnot. He is the more rebellious type. He is usually the one to get into trouble.
Yeah. He's the scamp.
Yeah,
I totally agree with that. The Were-Crow, the two segments were maybe the most depressing because they couldn't come up with anything that was specific to Crow. They just had to make up a bunch of stuff. Like, I don't get a sense that Crow has a sense of moral superiority to everyone around him. That seems more like a Tom thing. And he doesn't like bacon all that much, even though they suggest that he's really into bacon. They're just making up weird things. Like, he has a bunch of tattoo magazines. Like, it's not even that funny. It's just, do you really not have a settled personality for Crow anymore that you can't draw on that for jokes? Like, can't you bring up Earth versus Soup? Or his erstwhile romance to Estelle Winwood? There's lots you could draw on. And, like, a lot of these people were around when those sketches were being written. I just don't get what happened to the personality of the bots. And frankly, Mike's kind of gone too. Like, he very much feels like Mike in the movie, but in the sketches, they're all pitched the same way, you know?
Yeah, they're written identically.
Yeah. So, and they just, the jokes aren't as clever. Like, I rolled my eyes when the host segment started, and Mike goes down, he rappels down to Earth, and they're communicating on walkie-talkie or whatever, and Mike basically says, "Hey, how's it going?" And Crow's like, "We're all good here, over, you're a dope, over," and they just snicker over that for the next 5 minutes. Like, really? You're a dope? That's what you come up with? You're a dope.
And, like, I know that I think the personality started to change, and there may even be comments on this in the Amazing Colossal Episode Guide. Like, I know that they were trying to play around with the established dynamics of, like, Tom and Crow coinciding with, like, Mike taking over mid-season 5. Because I know that there are some, because like I said, I always saw Tom as the more put-upon one of the group, but there's, like, sketches, like, where Crow gets double jock lock and things that kind of, like, play up his nerdiness even when Trace is around, although, again, they're in much smaller doses. But at this point, like, all I remember from sketches and, like, the overall personality of Crow when Bill Corbett took over and they moved to SciFi is that Crow was, like, almost a blank slate who would kind of hop onto anything to have a personality. Like, one of the things we're going to encounter as we're watching these sketches is that there's going to be, like, a number of episodes. I think they're all from season 8. There could be more, like, in the latter 2 seasons on SciFi, where Crow just sees a character in the movie, and the entire joke of the sketch is he's dressed up like the character in the movie and says, "Oh, I'm this."
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the entire joke that gets stretched out. It's weird that Mike's thing is that he's just a guy. He has blonde hair.
Just to clarify, so Tom starts turning into Mike, and his thing is he has blonde hair, and he feels like he knows something. He's from Wisconsin.
I have a vague connection to Wisconsin, I think.
Yeah. That's not funny.
No, like, they could have gone super deep where as soon as Tom becomes the Were-Mike, he starts chasing after Gypsy, who is stealing his keyboard. They could have gone anywhere with his personality where he is, like, the perfect what I would call Midwestern passive aggressiveness, where he is friendly on the outside but very cutting with friends and quietly under his breath. Like, there is a number of things that you could do.
You could say I have a sudden urge to wear a sailor suit.
And reference, yes, his award-winning performance in Anything Goes.
Yes. I think what we're getting at here is, even though the riffing is still it can get very good in the sci-fi era,
Says you.
says me, the host segments, they just clearly don't want to do them anymore.
Now, Chris, I understand in your own archaeological dig for a werewolf skeleton, you found something super interesting on YouTube on the topic of lycanthropy.
I did. Did you know that there is an episode of the classic TV series Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, where the title of the episode is Werewolf? The plot of the episode: scientists on a tropical island are measuring the radioactivity of a volcano when they are attacked by a wolf. Professor Hollis shows signs of lycanthropy and threatens everyone on board, especially Admiral Nelson, played by Richard Basehart, whom he has infected. That summary is from A Dude Named Dude on IMDb, so thank you, A Dude Named Dude, who is also presumably a dude named Anyway.
Isn't A Dude Named Dude the sequel to A Gnome Named Norm?
So yes, somehow, mysteriously, this episode is available, at least for now, on YouTube. Link in the show notes. I have not had a chance to watch it yet. I assume neither of you have had a chance to watch it yet, since you're just hearing about it.
I've never seen anything with Richard Basehart in it.
I have not seen this werewolf. I have seen some of Airwolf, but that is different.
I have seen clips of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, but I had no idea that there was a werewolf-themed episode, which apparently was not syndicated, or at least not syndicated in some places, because it was too hot for afternoon TV. It was considered too scary an episode.
Well, they had to digitally remove all those shots of the Twin Towers in the background.
Yes. The twin fangs of the werewolf.
Never forget.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you also had a copy of Pure Moods growing up, you dork, or if you'd like to ask Beth or Adam anything, get in touch with us. Comment on our Facebook group at facebook.com/itsjustashow. Email us at info@itsjustashow.com. Visit our website at itsjustashow.com, or we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you to all our Patreon supporters. You can support It's Just a Show and access some superfan bonus bits by going to itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned on this episode of It's Just a Show, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/13.
Well, Chris, what are we listening to? What are we listening to?
We're listening to Pure Moods. Hey,
You did that octave much better than I did. What are we watching next?
Well, the most important day of the year is coming soon. Remober, the 5th of October, the birthday of Donald Pleasance. I know of no reason why his birthday season should not be remembered by us. So, to celebrate Donald Pleasance's upcoming birthday, let's watch Season 5, Episode 1, Warrior of the Lost World.
Boom. Hey, you remember this episode, Beth? Now, I did not ask you to quote the entirety of Pure Moods. Those are the only lyrics that are in those songs. But yes, it does feature that killer track, a talking motorcycle, local bad boy Donald Pleasance, and the greatest footballer to ever transition into cinema, Fred Williamson.
I'm looking forward to it. It's a good one.
Yeah, I remember this episode being super, super fun, but there's so much to get into, man. Happy Donald Pleasance Day, everybody, when the time comes.
Yeah, it's a really great episode. All right, looking forward to it. But on that note, say goodbye, everybody.
See you next time.
Rest in beast, America. Rest in beast.
Take it away, Theme Squad.
Hey,